Okay, we are on chapter 9. It's the last chapter of Rascal. At the end of this, I will give you the test numbers so you can go on and take the AR quiz. This chapter is chapter 9 and it's titled March and April. Early in March, the first signs of spring began to appear. My woodchucks came up from their holes under the barn to take a cautious look at the world and decided it would be wiser to sleep for a few more weeks. Meadow mice broke through the old snow crust to view the sky, and their big cousins, the muskrat, made similar forays from their ponds and streams to graze on any vegetation which showed a tint of green. As the mating season approached, the tabby cats meowed and treaded to attract neighborhood toms. Cottontail rabbits thumped the ground calling for mates, and skunks wandered for miles seeking the consolation that only another skunk can give. Rascal was becoming restless and unreasonable. On one moonlit night, I heard hair raising screams of rage. Grabbing a flashlight, I went out to find Rascal and another undoubtedly male raccoon trying to get at each other through the chicken wire. I chased away the intruder and put iodine on Rascal's scratches. On another evening, I heard very different sounds, the tremolo crooning of an amorous female raccoon trying to reach Rascal for more romantic reasons. I was only 12, but not unaware of the meaning of spring. The sighing of wind through the fir-tipped willows and the disturbing voices of the night made me almost as restless as the other young animals now awakening. During a week of unseasonably warm weather, we put the screens on the windows and doors. On the first night that we left the doors open, Rascal paid me a surprise visit. Evidently, he had learned how to lift the hook from the eye of the door of his cage, and he had not forgotten how to open the back screen to the house. He came to my bedroom, chirring happily, and burrowed under the covers. I could have padlocked the cage, but decided against it. That would have been a grossly unjust reward for Rascal's dexterity and his obvious delight in finding his way to freedom. However, when on a subsequent night my raccoon raided Reverend Thurman's hen house, I realized that time was fast out of our long idyll. Since Christmas, I had spent many hours completing my canoe. The most difficult part was stretching and framing and fastening the heavy canvas, which, while the unwieldy fabric was soaking wet. This process did the living room rug a distinct disservice, but I was so pleased with the finished result that my father did not scold me unduly. I asked him to tap the canvas, which had shrunk as tight as a drum over the ribs as it dried. He could see for himself the advantages of nailing it on while wet. I trimmed the pointed prow and stern with sheet copper, ran molding around the gunwale, added covered compartments at each end for duffel, and screwed on an outer keel. Except for varnishing the inside and enameling the outside of my canoe, on the outside, my canoe was ready for service. It might be wise to paint it in the barn, my father suggested. That seems reasonable, I agreed. The green you have chosen will look fine in the water, my father said, but it doesn't go very well with the other colors in the rug. The canoe was heavier than I thought it would be, so I asked two very good friends of mine, Art Cunningham, a fishing maniac like myself, and Royal Ladd, who owned a player piano, to help me carry the canoe to the barn, where we mounted it on sawhorses. We worked together on varnishing the smooth sanded interior and enameling the outside with 4 coats of glossy green. It was a beautiful thing, that long, streamlined canoe. The launching was on Saunders Creek, which had risen many feet above its bank in spring runoff. In some places, the brown flooded waters had spread more than a mile in width through the marshes. Art Cunningham and I gave the pencil slim craft its first workout, skimming over pasture fences, circling into placid backwaters, and streaking down the main current with the ease of fish or a water bird. As on the Brule, Rascal rode the prow, fascinated as always by the speed and danger. Except for the success of the canoe, there was little to be happy about as the season progressed. Reverend Thurman had his shotgun loaded, waiting for one more raid on his henhouse. Almost dismaying, Theo and Jessica had finally won their point. We were acquiring a full time housekeeper, whether we wanted one or not. Mrs. Quinn was said to be qualified in every respect: middle aged, ugly, cranky clean, and no nonsense. She examined our house minutely, ran her finger over the furniture to show us the dust, and demanded my bedroom for herself. That is, if I decide to take the position, Mrs. Quinn added, I'll let you know in a couple of weeks. It was sadly apparent that my father would be no match for our new housekeeper, but since we were being allowed 2 blessed weeks in which to maneuver, I decided to build a second line of defense. The presently unoccupied back bedroom on the second floor was virtually impregnable after I fitted a strong lock on the door and pocketed the key. I explained to my father that I would make my own bed, clean my own room, and let Mrs. Quinn take care of the rest of the place in any way that suited her. She had expressed herself quite firmly: no pets in the house. I thought perhaps that I might circumvent this unreasonable ruling by preparing a new entrance to my quarters. Opening off the large and airy bedroom was a small study at the very rear of the house. This too would be safeguarded by a lock on the bedroom door. And the little back room furnished another advantage: one window at one end of the gable, offering enticing possibilities. Cutting neat cleats, each 18 inches in length, I nailed them one above another at convenient intervals up the house to the back window. Now Rascal could climb to see me whenever he wished. I could also conveniently entertain some of my more or less human friends, boys of 12 for the most part. When I showed my father this new ladder, he merely sighed and suggested that I paint the cleats the same color as the house. I thought this was a brilliant idea since it made them practically invisible. My enemies would never be able to spy them out. In any case, they wouldn't know the secret knock. Dum dee dee dum 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 dum. And maybe you've heard that knock. And it is easily remembered, the easily remembered rhythm of shave and a haircut 2 bits. So here's the music for Shave and a Haircut 2 bits, and I'll play it, but typically YouTube doesn't allow me to have the sound on there, but you can also search it up if you're interested in hearing it. So then it just repeats itself. So that's the tune, and that's his secret knock that goes to the rhythm of Shave and a Haircut, 6 bits. It comes up as 2 bits, so it's interesting that he said 6 bits. With Rascal for my constant companion in all these preparations, I was exhilarated with my stratagems to foil Mrs. Quinn. But deep in my heart, I knew none of these plans would ensure Rascal's life. He ran the constant peril of being shot. Moreover, now he had grown into young adulthood, he was not entirely happy as a domesticated pet. I realized that I was being selfish and inconsiderate to keep him from his natural life in the woods. In my prayers, I always remembered Rascal first these days. Bless Rascal and Daddy and Theo and Jessica and Herschel, and make me a good boy, God. Amen. I suppose I realized that no one needed more protection than my raccoon. The 14 days of grace sped by far too swiftly, and the awful moment approached when Mrs. Quinn would confirm her acceptance and move in, bag and baggage. I was certain that she would chase the cats with her broom, flap her apron at the crow, hurt Wowzer's feelings by speaking to him sharply, and insist I padlock Rascal's cage. She had been terrified of my raccoon on the day she had inspected us. She might become his mortal enemy. One warm and pleasant Saturday, I made my decision. I can remember every detail of that day, hour by hour. Rascal and I had slept in my new bedroom. We came down the 15 steps of the curved stairway and ate as usual at the dining room table. Rascal was not behaving well that morning. He walked directly across the tablecloth to the sugar bowl, lifted the lid, and helped himself to 2 lumps. 13 pounds of raccoon on the dining room table is quite a centerpiece. But knowing in my heart what I was plotting, I couldn't scold or slap him. I told my father that Rascal and I would be away all afternoon and evening on a long canoe ride. I think he knew what I was planning. He looked at us quite sympathetically. Taking jelly sandwiches, strawberry pop, and more than a pound of soft shelled pecans, I led Rascal to where my canoe was waiting near the edge of the flooded creek. In a moment, it was launched upon the racing stream. All unknowing, my raccoon stood at the prow, occasionally coming back to me for another pecan. I remember thinking that it was sad that Herschel had not come home in time to see my handsome pet. We floated downstream, ducking to pass beneath the bridges. Soon we sped out into Rock River and turned upstream toward Lake Koshkonong. Rascal fell asleep during the hours I labored against the current. He awoke toward sunset as we reached the quiet mirror of the lake itself, heading toward the dark, wild promontory named Koshkonong Point. It was the evening of a full moon, much like the one when I had found my little friend and carried him home in my cap. Rascal was a big, lusty fellow now, 13 times the weight of this helpless creature to whom I had fed warm milk through a wheat straw. It's important to remember that. Remember the mother, or was it his aunt, who helped him learn how to feed him? He was very capable in many ways, able to catch all the food he needed along the creek on a marshy bay. He could climb, swim, and almost talk. As I thought about his accomplishments, I was both proud and sad. We entered the mouth of Koshkonong Creek by moonlight and paddled upstream several hundred feet into the depths of this wet wilderness, its region rich in fish and crayfish, fresh water clams, muskrats, mallards, the many forms of life that love wildness and water. The peepers shrilled and the bullfrogs thumbed their bass fiddles, and a little screech owl trilled a note reminiscent of Rascal when he was much younger. I decided to let my raccoon make his own decision, but I took off his collar and leash and put them in a pocket of my corduroy jacket as something to remember him by, should he choose to leave me. We sat together in the canoe, listening to the night sounds all around us, but for one sound in particular. It came at last, the sound I had been waiting for, almost exactly like the crooning tremolo we heard when the romantic female raccoon had tried to reach him through the chicken wire. Roscoe became increasingly excited. Soon he answered with a slightly deeper crooning of his own. The female was now approaching along the edge of the stream, trilling a plaintive call, infinitely tender and questing. Rascal raced to the prow of the canoe, straining to see through the moonlight and shadows, sniffing the air and asking questions. Do as you please, my little raccoon. It's your life, I told him. He hesitated for a full minute, turned once to look back at me, then took a plunge and swam to the near shore. He had chosen to join that entrancing female somewhere in the shadows. I caught only a glimpse of them in the moonlight glade before they disappeared to begin their new life together. I left pecans on a stump near the waterline, hoping Rascal would find them as I paddled swiftly and desperately from the place where we parted. And that is the end of the story. Now, just a few pictures to give you an idea. This is the home that Sterling North grew up in Wisconsin. So you have an idea of where he lived, what it looked like. And here is his town, the little red dot there is where he grew up. Now, some students recreated the scene of the living room with the canoe in the living room. And then obviously that's his sister Theo, and Rascal's at the prow of the canoe. I think that's a prow, I'm not for sure. And then you can kind of see the Christmas tree behind that cage wire where, remember, Sterling made that to keep Rascal away from the tree. So a student had recreated the scene in the living room. And then there is Sterling North older, and he has two raccoons there. Now, the last thing I want you to see is the quiz number. This is a grade 7, level 7 book, 7.1. It's worth 7 points. I did take it twice, the quiz. I wanted to see how I would do. The first time I did miss one because I did not carefully read through all of the choices for answers, and I didn't really think about it. There were just a couple that I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember the time where he saw the tree that was cut down and he was upset. And then there was one other one where if I had read through all the questions, I would have gotten it right away. I'm not sure which one I missed on that, but I did miss one. Then I went back in and took it again. So it's not very difficult if you were listening and paying close attention to the book as I read it. So good luck. I hope you earn all 7 points. I'm not sure if you get less points for someone reading it to you, but it's a good opportunity for you to earn some AR points.